And welcome everyone to our third day of the summit, where we'll be discussing breaking for making systems of protection. I would like to start and kick off this session with the special issue on science diplomacy and decolonization. And I'm going to share my screen now. Just a minute, bear with me. Can everyone see the screen? Excellent. So what we did was towards the end of the second or third year of the project, we started to think about how we're using our research, not just to leverage our research and leverage projects and help folks who are wanting to do research in the Global South, but we actually wanted to challenge the systems and that sort of arises from some of the conversations we were having around whether the systems were actually working with or against some of the stuff that we were doing in the Global South. And one of the things that came out of that was to think about, well, how have other researchers found doing research in the Global South? How have things like science diplomacy helped people who are doing research in some of these areas? And what has our experience been of that as researchers ourselves? And as part of that, we then decided to do a special issue on science diplomacy. So before I get into the special issue, I'll just do a very brief overview. So science diplomacy essentially is a framework where it's bidirectional. So in one direction, you have scientific teams working between nations. So you'll have someone working in a country like Sudan, from where I'm from, working with a team in the UK, for example, to solve some kind of societal problem or improve relationships. On the other hand, you have diplomacy that's also helping to open doors for scientific cooperation. And in that way, it's sort of a feedback loop in which the field of science and diplomacy sort of continuously work with each other to really help us understand and address some of these societal issues that we're working towards. Now, over the last 30 years, it has been working, but one of the issues that's come up, and that has come up from the discussions that we've had also, is that we're understanding that scientists and policymakers in the Global South are actually practicing science diplomacy, but under neo-colonial conditions. So that brings about, other conditions and other issues that need to sort of be addressed. And what we thought about is, well, why don't we open up a special issue and think about researchers working in different places in the Global South and how have they managed to work through science diplomacy under these neo-colonial conditions. So this is the special issue. It's in Frontiers in Public Health, and it's called Science Diplomacy and Neo-Colonialism, Lessons from the Field with a View to the Future. And it's the submission window is already closed. We've had several, quite a few actually, applications, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, the topic overview in general was what we were hoping to do and look at was framing science diplomacy in terms of neocolonialism in order for us to sort of really get to the root structure that we want to constructively challenge. For this issue, we called for papers that would demonstrate innovative and flexible models of science diplomacy with a focus on public health and health promotion policies specifically. And then the aim was to collect evidence across various aspects of research, which would demonstrate the practical role of science diplomacy in the Global South, as well as some of the structural challenges that were faced on the ground. And some of the examples of the research we wanted to look at was examples where building partnerships among stakeholders, anything where there was involvement with different types of stakeholders, including governments, UN, NGOs, academia, private sector, anything emphasizing that and its role in doing the research. Anything that looked at the mode by which scientific research is actually grounded in local culture and context. So that's a really important part of it, was that it's not sort of fly in, fly out type research, that it really is grounded in that local culture and context. And then any case studies that looked at research from the Global South that actually really was highlighting gender, ethnicity, disability, and that sort of thing. And then I'll show some of the examples of the papers that have already been published. So there was a paper from the US on the burden of trauma in the life of a refugee. And this was a perspective piece on a researcher who's working in the US with refugee populations there and what their experience had been and how they use science diplomacy and within the context of neocolonialism and what that looked like. And so it was a perspective piece. Then we had another called The Long Shadow of Accumulating Adverse Childhood Experiences on Mental Health in the UAE. And this was looking at policies and practices in the UAE. So not looking at just, implementing policies that were UK-centric or US-centric, but actually adapting them and actually working from the ground up and looking at what are the actual harms and adverse conditions that children face here in the UAE and working from that direction rather than, again, like I said, the copy-paste sort of way of doing things. And then the third was volunteer programs, empowerment, and life satisfaction in Jordan, mapping local knowledge and systems change to inform public policy and science diplomacy. Again, this was really highlighting from one of the contexts where we work in Jordan and looking at how public policy, again, is not just implemented from the sort of global north, but really is developed from the ground roots up. And basically, all of this is to basically link back to today. And what we want to do today is, I think one of the biggest things that we've realized through working through this network is that if the system isn't working, which we realize sometimes the system that is developed in the global north may not serve the global south or work well, then we need to actually start to think about a different way of doing it and a different way of conceptualizing how we do science and how we do research and how that is done, not just in a plug and play, bring the model, to the global south and do the research in that exact same model, because that would just be exacerbating neocolonialism, but really thinking outside the box and thinking about how we do things differently. I'm going to put my email up here if you had any questions about science diplomacy or neocolonialism or the special issue or anything like that. Please do get in contact with me, and I'm happy to share my slides also. And that's it for me. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll pause for maybe a minute or two if there were any questions. If not, I would like to introduce our next speaker.
So I'm going to be presenting the findings of an arts report compiled by Abdullah Awad, one of our Rights for Time fellows, who sadly couldn't be here to present it himself today. The report finds a lot of what we already know about art, but it draws on the testimony, the experiences, and the evidence, really, that our partners have produced. So I'm going to go through some of the key findings and some of the examples that Abdullah drew out. This was based on sort of his experience with the Rights for Time Network, and then also interviews and assessments of all the arts outputs of the research network as a whole. And he conducted extensive interviews with all of our partners to get a sense of all of the arts that were produced, even projects that weren't sort of arts-based, ended up having quite a large arts component for the reasons that we're going to go into here, right? So we've got here, thank you, Anela, for the slides. These are the kind of main sort of findings of Abdullah's report, right? That art represents, right? One, it is one of the only things a lot of our projects articulated that represent some of the very complex issues around time and trauma, right? Where language and its kind of linear capacity, having to build one by one by one by one, has to sort of by nature has to give a certain kind of perception. And of course, our language systems, the languages we operate within, the universes we're trying to communicate within, all of these have sort of preconceived ways of articulating concepts of trauma, concepts of belonging, of estrangement, and of time. And what art is able to do is represent, as we saw for anyone who was here on day one, and our arts commission was beautifully able to represent some of the complexities of time and trauma, and give us a visual language that we can rely on when language fails. And then art convenes. One of the things that we don't tend to look at when we propose sort of arts outputs is the community aspect. And what our sort of theoretical research findings constantly come down to, our community is incredibly important, right? Drawing on community knowledge, community networks, community as protection. And what art often does is bring community together and bring new communities sort of within a broader area together for common purpose, articulating a shared vision. It is something that people can work independently and collectively towards, feel they're being expressed through, and just bringing, as we saw, particularly with Zoe's work, but also with some of our other project partners, art was able to create collectives that outlived the production of the particular moment or the particular piece of art. So while the art is lasting, so are the collectives that come together to make it and the collectives of support. Right, and yes, of course, the safe spaces that are created in order to produce this artwork are also things that are sustainable over time. So alongside the art represents, sort of building on the representations that art allows, right? Art researches, art brings together things that research and development speak don't always put in the same context. So we can draw on the experience, draw on the production of art and the things that it makes possible to expand our research vision, expand the words that we use, the terms, and the way that we think kind of the relationships between different parts. And then, of course, beyond the sort of research capacity, but as an often untangible outcome of the work of arts-based practice, art heals, right? As creating something that makes a product, something that lasts in the world, being able to articulate visions of self, of community that go against larger systems that tend to occlude these. Art is healing as a practice, and then also healing in terms of things being able to circulate so that one's vision of the world, vision of the self, understanding of their own experience of time, trauma, repression, and identity can circulate in the world beyond the person, having a kind of a personal healing effect by being able to articulate something, but and then a much larger sort of healing process in its larger circulation. Abdallah in his report put together a wonderful kind of plea for continued arts funding, the recognition of the power of the arts to help to not only to do that research, but to help research sort of hop out of its disciplinary boxes, of being able to recognize with funding and outcomes and outputs all the ways that art does contribute to the larger goals of research, in particular around humanitarian protection. And of course, in these days of large cuts and the sort of deprioritization of the arts, an additional plea for the essential nature of continuing funding for arts organizations, but of course also research that has arts components so that it can build on, incorporate, and then more broadly share the arts that are produced in their sort of research healing capacities. So given these capacities, art evolves over time, its myriad forms capable of meeting the present moment. By being able to fund and support art outputs, the Rights for Time Network has shown the effectiveness of art and art making in our challenging transforming times and widening even our conception of time. So thank you. So thank you to everyone who contributed to the wonderful arts outputs. Shortly on our website, we will have gallery spaces, not only for the Arts Commission that we saw on Monday, but also being able to highlight all of the art sort of cumulatively created by our project partners, which we're really proud of. And just it does the research. It gives us different sort of visual language that we then have to work to put into sort of the language of protection, the language of time, and the language of trauma. So thank you for all those who contributed to the arts component of the Rights for Time Network. And then of course to Abdallah for compiling this lovely summary of what the arts have achieved.
Thank you, Nora, for delivering that. And thank you to Abdullah for putting all of that together. That was really wonderful to see. I'm going to move us to our next speaker. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Faith, who is going to talk about ethical storytelling and photography from her research findings. Is Dr. Faith with us?
No, I don't see her in the waiting room. Okay, well, we can move on to
should we switch?
Yeah,
Okay.
we should flip around. Yeah.
All right, so we'll just switch it around. So I'll introduce Dr. Dia, who's going to talk about reclaiming history through story and memory.
Hello all. Thank you very much. Sorry, I've got a very strong cough, and today I'll be sorry.
Take your time. If you need a minute to just get some water or something.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I need some water. Sorry for this. Today, Samara and I will be talking about our project, which is reclaiming perception through story and memory, which is the case of Iraq's Mandain. So the Mandain is a very small community, which is one of the minority who live in Iraq, and whose number was before around 100,000 people, but nowadays they are only 4,000 to 5,000 people. Because of the wars and the sectarian wars and conflict, most of them had to flee Iraq to different countries in the diaspora. So today we'll be talking about the project. And the background, we'll talk about the background, why reclaiming perception through story and memory, and the project aim, and the approach and the intersection with Rise for Time, and our outputs and the impact. So the background, the Mandains, also they called the Saba Mandain, who are the followers of one of the oldest monotheist religion. Historically, they settled in the southern areas of Iraq and Iran. The Mandain also constitute an important part of Iraq cultural and social identity. Due to the repeated violence and conflict they experienced in Iraq over the past decade, the Mandain community was dispersed inside Iraq and displaced around the globe. Their culture and customs, rituals, language, also endangered because of that. So also they are one of the communities. They are very little is known about them, about their history or culture, and thus many myths and lies have been fabricated around their existence and practices. So in this project, we try to recognize the Mandains who do not live in isolation in Iraq, but they are part of the social fabric, and their displacement not just affected them, but also affected the wider Iraqi community. Therefore, the narrative is incomplete without the stories and memories of their friends or the neighboring communities, and the Muslims and the Christian and other religions. So through this project, we aim to work with the Mandain in Iraq and abroad, as well as the neighboring communities to reconstruct and reclaim their rich collective narrative and perception built around it. So our aims the first aim is to document their stories, memories, and of the Mandain who live inside Iraq, and also those who are living in the diaspora. And also our aim is to create the first of a kind an archive for this community. Also to record the interviews of the surrounding communities in Iraq and listen to the accounts of their peaceful coexistence before and at the present time, and get more in-depth information about the gaps of this minority. Also to raise the awareness in Iraq about their problems and what they are facing nowadays. also to highlight the stories of peaceful coexistence and highlight the common and shared history that brings the communities together and promote tolerance and build stronger cohesion by engaging in a variety of advocacy action. Next slide, please. Yes, so so the data will be collected, the project's already done. It has already been collected, and the interviews were collected, and all the data have been collected. And the Mandarin, the diaspora, to record their accounts, challenges, heritage, their way of living, memories about Iraq, and so the non-Mandarin communities who live around the Mandarins in the south areas or cities in Iraq. Also, we recorded their memories and accounts of the communities, and we listened to them and to their perception about this community or this minority. The data consists of people's stories and opinions about their experience. Also, outputs were imagined as both textual and audio visual material, as both documentation and narration. Next one, please. So I will leave Summer will talk about this slide and the role of R for the Rights for Time.
Thank you, Dia. So for us, this project was actually very much related to the Rights for Time, in a way, subject and philosophy. And it touched upon two main concepts or main realities that the Rights for Time network was concerned about. And one is harm and the other one is time. And we'd like to maybe just say a few words on how we've been able to contextualize these concepts within this project specifically. So while we understand harm as a physical harm, which are usually, these are kinds of harms that are attended to, visible and attended to immediately, we were very much interested in the invisible harms, the ones that are in a way kept personally and sometimes very difficult to come out and to be shared. So this project was very much about trying to understand how we can connect with the invisible harms and how we can provide a space to actually let these harms be exposed and in a way mitigated through this project and through this idea of sharing stories and memories and recollection of what happened. But what we discovered is, in a way, the biggest harm that has happened with this community and for the neighbors of these communities in Iraq and for Iraq as a whole, really, was the forms of displacement that occurred. And this is because displacement is very much, especially with the community of the Mindayans, is an interruption to their lives and an interruption to them individually and as a family and a community. I think more than 80% of the Mindayans that lived in Iraq are now outside of Iraq, which has directly affected actually their ways of living and their ways of practicing their rituals and customs. And they're, as we will see in the outputs, they're people who depend very much on also the geography that they live in. So for instance, I think Dia has mentioned, they tend to live next to water because a lot of their recurring rituals and customs have to do with being in water and doing, I'm forgetting the word, but tamid, if someone knows how to say it in English. But yeah, these are rituals that depend on the geography you're in. So you can imagine when they are displaced into countries that they're not able to be next to water, a lot of their customs and rituals have been in a way interrupted and taken away, and they're not able also to pass it on to the next generations. In terms of time, because I think this is such a difficult story, we wanted to also treat time here as malleable. So we didn't necessarily want to treat time as an event and then just a reflection on this event. On the contrary, we wanted to understand time as stories. So the stories of the people, this is why we're focusing on the stories of how people live together, how they coexisted, their memories, what they remember about each other's. And in a way, we're trying to also connect time as a form of healing that harm. but also to say that time is really a space rather than just this chronicle or this linear thing. And when we reinterpret time as a space, we're able to, in a way, also imagine new ways of treating these conditions of trauma. I don't know, Dia, would you like to run quickly over the outputs?
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
share?
So we are very proud that we have good outcomes. The first one of these outcomes is the book, which is around 300 pages. It is in Arabic, and over 100 copies were printed and distributed to the library. Sorry, to the libraries. And to some universities, and also to the Mandarin community and to the non-Mandarin community. And also we have symposium on talks. We have one of the symposium which is has been done in cooperation with the University of Kufa and the UNESCO chair for the interreligious dialogues on the University of Baghdad and University of Babylon. And the other one, the other talk also, which was done in the last 2 days. So the day before tomorrow. The day before yesterday. Also, we had the exhibition. We printed in a good size some of the photographies that we took for the religious practices, and we printed them on a good size, and we did an exhibition in the Mandarin Day, which later on Summer will talk about. So we did also a documentary which is about around 41 minutes. It's about the religious history, about their languages, and we did also some interviews with the surrounding or neighboring communities of the non-Mandarin Iraqis. Also, we did a brochure because the leader of the Mandarin community also asked us whether it is possible to produce brochures in Arabic and English, because they have visitors and tourists who are coming from Iraq and non-Mandarin, and also who are coming to visit Iraq. So if it is possible, they asked us if it's possible to produce one. So we did 2 brochures, okay, in Arabic and in English. And these brochures, it's about their religion, their history, their numbers, and their difficulties, and their religion. So it's a general view about what the Mandarin are. And also, we did an interactive mural. Summer will talk about this one. Will take us in a tour on the website. Summer.
Thanks, Dia. I think I need to share. So what we've done also as part of this project, we focused on using art as a way to form the kinds of things we'd like to do, but also as the output. So the website itself is also considered an artistic output. And part of the reason is because we're hoping that this website, although it will be connected to obviously the Rights for Time network website, but we're hoping that the website can be a living website, so the time lingers. And then we are talking about how to maybe create a way that news stories from non-Mandaeans and Mandaeans can be actually then fed into this website. And we're talking with some web developers on a way to do this. But if, we'll share the website in the chat. And the website pretty much takes you through the story of the project, how we've approached it. And then it goes through pretty much chronologically on the outputs and the things that Dia has already talked about. And we'll go through some of them, but just to give you sort of an overview on how you're able to navigate the website. And we've connected our research and we've connected the explanation of how we do things in the website. So it's not only just a website to see outputs, it's a website to also interact with the project story, narrative, and methodology. So as you can see, there has been quite a number of outputs, and the outputs were of two kinds. There were the interactive events, as Dia has mentioned. So there were talks, there were symposiums, and this was needed because actually the Mendaeans and the non-Mendaeans have not really come together in one space. So this was in a way a first of its kind for them to share space, and we broke a lot of sort of stigma around them being in one space and talking and sharing there, because the Mendaeans tend to be in a way exclusive and somewhat fearful of actually engaging in the wider Iraqi space. So these events have really helped bring them together. And of course, in the events, Diya would provide all of this material for people to take with them, so that the story in a way goes on. But we have also interactive methods in the website, so you're able to see those outputs as sort of lively. So I'm going to share maybe just a few minutes from, sorry, bear with me, from the documentaries. Oops. So this is the Mendaean Day that Diya talked about, and maybe we're able to just see a few minutes from it. I know we're probably running out of time.
No, you're doing completely fine, Simone.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if you can hear sound, but there is sound. No.
No sound.
Okay. Should we try? I think I have to maybe stop share again and say share
Yes,
sound.
please.
Okay, sorry.
When you go to share, you should see.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Share sound. All right.
Thank you.
I always miss that one. All right. In many ways we can just start it. Okay. Can you hear it now? I'm guessing. Yeah. So as you can see, also this was shared on a lot of national stations in Iraq. So the story went beyond just the southern region or the participants, and it's truly
Want to see how easy it is to
sorry.
get cancelled? Book with us to
So the story in a way traveled across, and by producing these also textual materials, we were able to make sure that the conversation goes on. And I'm going to very quickly just show 1 minute out of the documentary. The documentary is long and it tells a comprehensive story, but maybe to show the practices of baptism that the Mandaeans conduct, and that in a way showcases that context, the geographical context of their lives. So maybe just a minute from the... And this has not really been done before because they consider their spaces to be quite private. So Dia has been able to provide us access to a space that has not really ever been exposed. But they seem to feel the need that they'd like to share their story, especially after the trauma and the harm that has been inflicted. And in some ways, it's to make sure they archive their story.
صبينا بس بدت
صبينا بس بدك
آت بهرام ربك
بحرام ربك
بررور بيت
بررور بي
مصبتي تناطري
تناطري
وتسقلريش
وستقري
شمت هي
مش مت هي
مش من دات هي
من دات هي
متخرقلي
بتخرق.
So you're able to watch the full documentary on the website, which I definitely recommend. And maybe just last we can share, explore the interactive mural that we thought about. So the concept behind the interactive mural here was really as a way, and in some ways, I think it's been touched upon by the previous speakers on this session, is to use art to be able to tell a very difficult story. And, you know, these stories can be very personal, and from contexts and geographies like that of Iraq, it's not that common to also share such personal trauma. Usually it stays within familiar and intimate groups. So we thought art will enable us to represent the stories and the narrative through a different lens, which can be representative of the communal, the collective, but also on a personal level. By the person who shares and the person who views as well, because we think art has this ability to connect individually and collectively at the same time. So each can connect in a different way and associate in a different way. So the concept of the mural really is everything that we've sort of collected in the stories that we did, we represented it in a way abstractly into these elements that represent Iraq, the Mandaeans, the things they cherish, the things they interacted, and also some things that were repeated in many of the interviews that we've been able to represent in the mural. So the idea is that, sorry, of course the internet's up. There has to be, so the idea is that you understand first the geographical context, and then we focus obviously on the areas that they exist, which you can obviously see it's next to the river, next to water. And then when you click it, it tells you the concept of the mural. It describes it, and we've been using both Arabic and English to explain all of these things. Then you're able to actually say view the mural, and then you get into this interactive mural, which you can pan, and you look at these elements, and these elements are interactive. So whenever you click on an element, it highlights itself. And what happens is if you click on the element, we have these snippets from the interviews, and these snippets are meant to tell sort of a descriptive story or a descriptive memory or moment. And what we did is we've given the textual for the non-Mendeans, and then we have a different kind, which is an audio that will be for the Mendean voices. And so in some ways, just to help the viewer who interacts with the mural to understand that the text will be voices from non-Mendeans who lived with the Mendeans, and the audio would be the voices of the Mendeans. So just to give an example, if you click here, for instance, sometimes we match because what we found, we will have overlapping or things that connect to the same subject matter. And this is in Arabic, so we have to maybe find, but this is what
العادات والتقاليد أو المناسبات الدينية لا ما تغيرت عندي هنا في دول مهجر بقيت محافظة عليها لكن مو مثل العراق حلاوتها وكل شيء بقيت أعلم أولادي همينة يعني بس
I've been muted this whole time, sorry.
الاجتماعية.
I just discovered I've been muted this whole time while I'm describing the mural. Okay, so I'm just gonna summarize. Oh, you did?
Samar, we heard you. You weren't muted.
Oh, so maybe when I play the thing, it gets muted.
Yeah. No, we heard you. No, you're all good.
Sorry. All right. So yeah, just so these snippets also from the interviews are pretty much describing what the project is about, the memories, what they've been able to take with them into the displacement, what means a lot to them, what they try to protect and preserve. And then sometimes we also overlap it, as you saw, with also memories and descriptions from their neighbors who pretty much match or allude to the same thing. And just to move, sorry, because it's shared, the moving is a bit, but just to try and show that these are all elements that mean something, and you'll find them in the book. They will be described, the meaning of boat, the meaning of the watermelon, and I think you saw a little bit from the video. The meaning of all these elements in the Mendean story and in the Mendean life and culture and customs are described in the book. So in some ways, this whole thing is a complete narrative through different modes of art. For instance, this represents they're goldsmiths. Mendeans are historically goldsmiths, and also they make boats. So we've tried to pretty much represent that. And then, overlap the stories and the snippets over these elements. So you're able to just click on things.
في بالك فد روائح تحن إلها يعني
so this is talking about smells that they miss.
طبعا العطور ما تنصف في كل مكان
مثل القداح.
The idea is that belonging and memory is beyond just also just visual. There are senses like the smell and such that stay on and linger, and people talk about and describe very well. Right, for some reason it's just not moving interactively very well, so there we go a little bit. But yeah, you'll be able also to go into the website and explore it more. And I asked maybe Dia as the last thing to just say a couple of words on the impact, because actually we've been very pleasantly surprised that a lot of Mendeans and non-Mendeans have approached Dia after all of this, asking him to find a way to continue this project and to continue this conversation between Mendeans and non-Mendeans. And I'm not sure if Dia, you want to say just a sentence or two?
Yeah. So I think one of the impact that we made is that we have been approached by some of the institution, the government institution. The last one was Beit al-Hikma, which is very prestigious and very well done institution in Iraq, that they asked us after the Mandain Day event we did. So they asked whether it is possible to arrange something like that. And we did it 2 days ago, and it was very successful. We brought lecturers from University of Baghdad, College of Languages, also University of Babylon and University of Kufa. And we have, which is the good thing, that we have people from different religious sects. So we have from Bahaism, we have Kurds, we have Arab, we have the Mandarin. Also, they send their representatives to attend that. And the good thing is that we have in each event, we made sure that the Mandarin voice is heard. So we have one from the Mandarin community who were able to talk in this event to say something about their religion. So they felt very happy, and they felt they are really part of this. And they are very happy, and they asked us. And yesterday also I got a call, and from a Mandarin guy, he said, is it possible to be part of this network? Because they really become part of the network. They with the academics and non-academics, and they start planning for a future event even without us. Okay, so they invite us for their plans too, which is a good thing. Okay, so this is the aim. Also, we were able to shed light and raise awareness about what they face now in Iraq, and how many people are from them now live in Iraq. So they were, for example, 100,000 people. Now they are only 4,000 and 5,000. So we would like to encourage people who are living abroad also to come to visit and to create this coexistence. So we also were able to create a media coverage, which is very good and very important for this event to be covered and to be shared on the public public platforms like the social media and other parts, with the YouTube and other platforms, and academic from the Mandarin who are living abroad asked me whether it is possible to apply for a future to maintain or to do their own museum. Okay, the other one, he said whether it is possible to our language is endangered. Can we do something about it? So they are approaching us, and we are also encourage them to do something to their heritage, to their religion, and to their existence eventually. So also, yeah, so I think we did well with the support of Rights of Time and in covering all that and raising the awareness. And bring people from different sects to come together in one space to share and to talk about what they face and what they feel toward each other. So, and also in the interviews, they had their say by saying what they feel about their departure and after they left Iraq, and they send their memories. And also we asked some people inside Iraq to write letters. It is imaginary, that I asked them to imagine a friend, a Mandarin friend who they lived with them before, and write a letter. And they wrote very emotional letters to them. So they asked them to come, that they missed them. So all these are different layers and different levels of, that can support this community. It is. I think it is a very good project, and we are proud and that we were part of this one. And also we thank you very much for your general support. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Dr. Dia and Samar. Thank you so much for sharing. And Anila has added all the links to the chat, and Dr. Dia added a link there if you'd like to view any of those websites. Thank you so much. I'll open the floor now for a few minutes for questions. Samar, there's a question in the chat for you. I can read it.
Sure, go ahead.
I can read it out so that so Nora's asking, can you speak further on how the mural was created and how personal stories were collected for representation?
Yeah, so as we talked earlier, the method we did was pretty much interviews. So we had a local team in Iraq itself that did interviews. Mainly in Iraq, we did interviews with the non-Mandaeans, so the ones that were sort of left in the community where the Mandaeans lived, but we focused on the areas where the Mandaeans used to live. And then we also talked to Mandaeans in Iraq, but unfortunately, as Dia has said, there's only 8,000 left out of maybe 100,000 in Iraq. So the majority has left Iraq. And through Dia, we were able to connect with Mandaeans in the diaspora. And they also did their own interviews. And the interviews were sort of semi-structured. So they were more about actually having sort of like a chat or conversation. And we felt like, to use the community within itself to do these interviews. So we didn't bring anyone from outside the community. We brought people who are familiar with each other to break that interview structure and to make it more into a story or into just, sharing a chat. So we collected all of those. We transcribed the interviews. We translated them. And then we worked with a graphic designer, a drawer. And we actually... This was not an easy process because, also to try and relate something about other people's history, which is very complex and very old. We sort of deliberated a lot into how should we be representing this. And in some ways, we took the sort of abstract method, not the real representative method, to be able to in a way reflect that idea of malleability and the idea that we leave you to linger. So the mural is really also allowing you, or we're hoping that it allows you to feel rather than read literally these elements. But yeah, we think the graphic designer did very well. He had to read a lot of the material that was produced. So pretty much putting all together into one art project. And actually, we're hoping to add more audios and, that Dia is still collecting. So as I said, this is going to be like a living website.
Yeah, and also I would like to add something that we have now so many interviews, okay, that we make another outputs for this project, and what makes this project as important because one family, as one of them describe it as Eid, which is a religious event, Eid in 4 continents. He said, what makes it difficult that in one family you can find one in Australia, one in Canada, one in the United States, and one in Jordan, and one in Iraq. So it is very difficult for them to gather in, for example, one religious event, or if they want to gather in a day. So he said also, he said, imagine that one day we tried to celebrate and we came in one place. They say our kids they don't have lingua franca, and they don't have a common language so that they communicate with each other. So one use Arabic, the other one, for example, use English, and the other one use another language. So they use sign language. Okay, so those who are, especially those who are living in different countries that they do not speak English or Arabic, or they have they do not have a language that is in common. This is one thing, and also they need water to celebrate and to live because they are friends of water. They are very close to each other, so they cannot live wherever, as they say, wherever you find a river, you can find Mandai, because they cannot do it unless they find rivers or water. Yeah.
Are there any questions? Any more questions? If not, I'll suggest we go for our 10-minute break and we will reconvene at 1:40. Thank you so much again to Dia and Summer. That was really great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see my screen. Yes. Yep. Brilliant. So this session is really trying to take some learning and some lessons from what was an attempt at doing things slightly differently in terms of how we ran things within the grant, within the network as well, and how we genuinely tried to learn from each other. And so this is hopefully a bit of reflection on what that entailed. Some of it worked very well, I think, and some of it didn't, and worked less well. And hopefully towards the end of this session, we'll have a chance for people to input into what they thought worked really well in relation to it, and which bits worked less well, and ideas for the future as well. And this fits very much with our theme for today of breaking for making. An awful lot of these structures we inherit are structures with a particular set of politics that sit behind them, politics usually of hierarchy, of top down, of bureaucracy and regulation, and one kind of person being right all the time. And throughout the long process of the network, we've tried to break some of those so that there's some space for remaking structures, ways of doing things that are slightly better, that respect slightly better the expertise that sits across the network, and not just within pockets or not just within a hierarchy. So the core question that this little part of the session will ask is how we keep all of those ethics that we wanted at the beginning of the network. We sat around and thought, well, how would we run this in an ideal world? How would we get that expertise, make sure it's not global north imposed ideas, but much more collaborative, etc. How do we preserve those ethics despite being stuck within systems that require certain things of us on a day-to-day basis, things that the system requires, that institutions require, etc. So to put a bit more flesh on that, these are just some of the ethics that we thought we were trying to embark upon through the network, that forefronted would be global south teaching global north things, that decisions and approaches would be collaborative. So instead of one person deciding, that actually most things would be the result of collaboration, discussion. Most ideas would be shared ideas rather than one genius that sat over there that's come up with the ideas. It'd be much more collaborative in what we were seeking to do. That being a network that's centered on time, we would really respect what that meant. We would respect people's time, and that means not wasting it. That means using it for the most valuable things that we can use it for. So if someone is very busy with something, that we let them be busy with that thing and not distract them with things that are less valuable. That we would be non-hierarchical, that this wasn't about there being, a senior person that told everyone what to do, but actually much more about sharing and getting the best ideas from wherever they came. And that we would be open about mistakes and open about challenges and open about where things might be better. So that was some of the ethics. There were lots more things and ideas that we discussed, but just to give you a flavor of some of the things we were seeking to achieve. As you probably sat there, you're probably going, well, that one didn't quite work out so well, or that one was a real challenge, or, well, that was very optimistic. That one didn't work out that way. And so I suppose the next link in that is some of the operational aspects that just are very, very hard to avoid. Very hard to avoid. And many of you will know this from various organizations that you've worked in, various contexts you worked in. But this is, again, just a small flavor of some of the operational day-to-day things that, have been very demanded of the network and of what we've been doing. Some of that is due diligence, checking that the money's going to the right place, to the right person, and that person is going to do the right thing with the money, that sort of stuff. That covers an awful lot of legal stuff, a lot of stuff around risk and managing risk and those sorts of things. Reporting, eventually, if you go all the way back up the chain, it was the UK government gave us all, quite a lot of money, and they want to know what we did with that money. So there's got to be some reporting along the way. And to make sure that things keep moving and we don't get to the end of everything and go, well, nothing's happened. That involves some tracking. So keeping kind of updated with things as it goes along. So it's not just this big crash at the end. Budgets, knowing how much money's left, where that money's going, who has what money, who's not spent money, who spent too much money. All of that is somewhat unavoidable. And timelines. So things come to an end, other things need to start on time. So a lot of these things are quite unavoidable in their basics. But then the last link in the chain is how you do it. So we've got some choices we can make about how we take those operational aspects and fit them together with our ethics or the things that we would like to do through the network. And so I think I've exaggerated a little, but the norm of doing these things is to take all of these operational constraints and just kind of soak them up and take them without too much challenge, not to do that breaking of the structures. And so the norm is off-the-shelf, very standard training packages. So for example, on safeguarding, you just get someone in who's an expert on so-called expert on safeguarding, and they give the same package that they give to everyone. It's not context specific, it's not adapted, it's not really talking about the specific context or the specific challenges that you might face in that project. That you have lots of forms, lots of bureaucracy, because that's kind of the easiest way of keeping a paper trail. But it's not very respectful of people's time. That you've got lots of duplication, lots of people being asked the same questions over and over again, without kind of taking account of, well, we've kind of already asked that for reporting, so we can use that in relation to finance, for example. The competition is exaggerated and built in, that even though you've got lots of people all working towards the same objective, whether that's the team in the UK or the many projects or even applicants for the grants that were awarded, that everyone's pitted against each other, that it's this exaggerated version of competition rather than acknowledging that actually everyone wants to achieve more or less the same thing, rather than acknowledging that there are just very, very many good projects, and it's not that one's better than the other, it's just the way that there's not enough money to go around. So instead of exaggerating that competition, acknowledging that we don't need quite so much competition. And that, the cutoffs, the norm is that the cutoffs and deadlines and demands get very harsh, very demanding, quite abrupt, quite rude sometimes. And so that was what we were faced with as a starting point. And our process throughout, which we now kind of have framed a bit as breaking and remaking, has been to take some of those norms and to try and break them so that there is more space for that making of our ethics. So to break apart those structures, those norms of what the funding landscape looks like, what the structures around funds look like, so that we had more space to make some of these ethics and make different ways of doing things that were in accordance with our ethics for the network. And so throughout through the course of the network, we have, I think experiments is probably the best way of putting it. I don't think any of us would claim that, there was a blueprint that we went, right, we definitely know this is definitely going to work. They have often been experiments into different ways of doing things, different ways that we might be able to better deliver on that different ethics of doing things. So instead of each project having an investigator attached, or a senior person or anything like that, or a supervisor even, all terms I've seen in different projects. Instead of that, we've run with much more of a mentoring dynamic, that someone that's there to support, not supervise, someone that's there to assist you, to collaborate with you rather than to oversee you. So that's one of the experiments. I think there's been an awful lot of flexibility around dates, start dates, end dates, around dates for delivery. There's been a huge amount of flexibility in building in, and that's been, again, thinking about time and what we're doing with time and what the significance of time is in all of these projects. An awful lot of the time, the training has been by discussion rather than by, here's a set of materials. I'm the expert. I'm going to tell you how to do safeguarding, for example. It's been, here's a set of ideas. Shall we discuss them? Has been the norm. We've tried to double up with as many things as possible. So instead of, a report that is used for reporting and a different bit that's used for a website and a different bit that's used for finance, we've tried to combine those as many times as possible, so that those things don't need to repeat every month and we don't need 3 forms every month. We can boil it down a wee bit. And so these themes have kind of repeated through in some of our experiments. And just to mention 2 kind of examples of where these have been most prominent. One in the digital mentoring sessions, which formed a bit of a backbone through the network, a bit of a way of, again, rather than lots of emails, lots of bureaucracy, lots of reporting and forms and mandatory training, that these were sessions where actually people could turn up if they were useful to them, again, respecting people's time. They could come to them even if they weren't, even if they hadn't been successful in getting some money out of the network. So if they hadn't been successful in applying for a grant, actually this was a space that they could still benefit from the network. It wasn't a kind of them and us or an exclusive space. It was a much more open space to anyone who wanted to make use of it. And these covered kind of, yes, the standard stuff, the kind of more the stuff we had to do around safeguarding, the stuff we had to do around the network, but also folded in an awful lot of things that were based around what projects and what partners were telling us was most useful. So everything from art was something that was asked for and interested. That the session on influencing and evidencing as you went along, that was asked for, etc. So responding to need rather than it being a top-down approach. And the mentor and mentee relationship as well. And Kirsten in particular did an awful lot of work to set this up, to make sure this was working the right way and to make sure it was fitting with those ethics the best way possible. So again, rather than it being bulletins or centrally dictated, that the much more one-to-one with a mentor, that it was about expertise sharing rather than here's all the things I'm telling you. It was much more let's learn from each other, and that we were able to fold in analysis and thinking about in reflection. So the network analysis bit, learning from those relationships as we went along and learning so that we can do things better and others can do things better in the future as well. So I have a space for discussion and others' ideas, and I hope others will have ideas. To assist with that discussion, I've sketched a couple of different graphics. One is about project timelines. So the one in red, I think, is what we imagine a project's meant to look like, which is very straight, linear, starts in one place, goes to the other. I think the different lines in the green box, I think, are some examples of how we've seen project timelines go, which is actually they go much less far than we think they're going to, or they get to the same endpoint, but there's a big gap in the middle. There's a bit where everything's gone a bit quiet. Some end up further back than they were when they started. Some go through twists and turns and all over the place, but actually get to the same endpoint. So these are different ways that project timelines have come through. And I think in terms of learning from one another, there's definitely been an awful lot of us reflecting that in how the network is being run and operated. So that's one, if anyone has any comment on that set of thoughts about project timelines. Another one is around how we think we're learning. So again, the classic version is the top down, so the one in the red box, where lots of people up on high teach someone down below. But actually, there's been other learning dynamics throughout the network as well, some of which is mutual learning. So there's not someone that's higher or lower, but we're all learning together. Some of which it's been lots of different directions and actually parallel projects working in parallel, learning from each other, and people in different relationships at par learning from each other as well. And the final third one on the right there is actually an awful lot of so-called bottom up, but essentially people learning whatever position they happen to be in. So again, interested in comments on any ways that's worked or things that could have been better in that sort of learning dynamics aspect. And the last one is around structures and due diligence. So I said about trying to minimize. So again, the classic kind of example, I think, is the one in the Peach Ready box, which is lots and lots of things cascaded onto a university or an institution, and they just pass them on to the next person, and they get passed on to the next person until this poor dot at the bottom gets crushed by forms and requests and emails and all the rest. Not very pleasant. Versus, I think, the next two green boxes, which in various different ways. So the middle box shows a bit of pushing back up and saying, hey, institution, we're not doing that. That doesn't need to be done. So I'm pushing back up against that. Some of which the faded one is, well, we'll do it, but we can minimize it. We'll kind of half do it. And then the third box is actually that condensation of things. So yeah, there's still 4 things that need done, but how can we compress them into one single request rather than making 4 requests at 4 different times? So those are the things I had to say, or just in terms of reflections about that digital mentoring process and learning from each other. But I'm really keen that everyone is open and honest and has any thoughts, please bring them now, please. Questions, comments? Yeah, Rasha.
Ben, can I start us off? Because it's really, I love those diagrams you did towards the end. That's really fascinating. I'm wondering, so we're conceptualizing of these things differently, and this project has helped all of us really conceptualize it that way. If I go back to the one with the timelines, is there any way you think projects like ours and networks like ours can help inform decision makers so that systems can acknowledge that things don't always work, sort of in that peach box? Is there some kind of communication? Because it's well and good for all of us to think about it and have those conversations and say, the due diligence should look like this, or it could look like this, or these are some of the ways. But I think taking some of that lessons learned, and we've talked about this within the network, but taking that back to systems and to decision makers and really trying to say, yes, this is, the status quo, but can we challenge that for good cause? Can we challenge it because it's actually hindering the research that we want to do and the work that we want to do? And it's a question to you or to anyone here.
Yeah, I'll give you my thought, which I was thinking about. I was thinking about this question as I was writing this presentation. Actually, again, we've obviously thought about it an awful lot on the way through, which is the classic tension between working within the structures and languages of a system, which aren't quite right, but you try and fit everything into those languages. So I even did it a wee bit just now, which is talking about risk, right? So sometimes funders will talk about, we're willing to fund high risk projects, but without any real understanding of what risk means, right? Or they're looking for risk to look a particular way. And actually what we know from this is that a lot of the actual risks don't conform to that title. Risk is about messiness, right? And actually so there's that tension between, do we keep trying to fit into these languages of due diligence and risk and safeguarding, or do we go, actually, you're using the wrong word. That word doesn't really make sense. What we're talking about is messiness or safety or those sorts of things. And so that was my reflections. I don't know what the right solution is, but I was thinking about that, the dominance of those languages sometimes and how we play along with them a wee bit. Anyone else got thoughts on that question or anything else? I think, just thinking of a few examples, obviously across the course of the years of the network, there have been multiple crises, like huge crises, bombs going off crises, and genocide crises, and funding cut crises, and cultural crises, and military crises, like so many crises. And if you stick that in a very bureaucratized constrained institutional environment, actually the instinct will be to say, oh, that's extremely high risk, or we're just not going to do it. Versus, I think what we've learned, and the network has kind of, the knowledge the network has developed and the learning we've done from each other, is actually the crisis is only as big as people's ability to deal with it, right? So often when these crises have hit, actually the solution has been to ask partners, ask the people who are closest to the crisis, well, is this a huge, it looks big, but is it this big? Is this anything you're not used to? Is this something that like feels bigger than normal? Or is this something you're actually very able to navigate? Because if you're able to navigate it, it's actually not this huge crisis. And I think that's part of the challenge is thinking about what is a crisis. It's not just the thing you see in the news, it's also people's ability to deal with it within reason. There's obviously bounds to all of that as well, but yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? Anyone want to tell me something I missed or I'm wrong on? Okay. Nora? Yes, no?
Oh, just insofar as we would love to hear from project partners and just around the experience of the network. We did some interviews a while back, and the feedback was it's such a great place to just air grievances, talk back up, help structure recommendations for things down the line. And so all of these things we talked kind of ad nauseum about during the setup of the network. And I know there have been a few interviews, we don't want to reduplicate things that have already been said, but certainly a space for reflection, assessment, helping us make recommendations and what worked well, what didn't. So yeah, just kind of an urging and opening of space for critical reflections. We know that things weren't done perfectly, but we can't do better unless we have help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an open invitation to feed that stuff through in whatever form I think is most useful, whether it's here or via email or just a quick chat or whatever. Yeah, and you noted, Nora, the stuff that's already been collected, the experiences have already been collected. And those are genuinely being all put into one place and will be used to kind of inform as well. So yeah, that's not lost either. Okay. If there are no comments now, again, feel free to comment in the chat or email or whatever. We'll move on to some of our project presentations for this afternoon. And we've got some great ones. Chantal, if it's okay, we'll start with you. Are you happy? I realize I've got you out of order, but are you happy to go now? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just introduce you. So it's a real pleasure. Chantal was one of the projects I had the pleasure of mentoring through. So Chantal Ntube is with the Forest Lofts, and they're talking about a whole load of things, but including going back through memory and archives and lots of really interesting kind of cultural memory in there as well. So I'll hand over to you, Chantal. When time's up, I'll be a bit abrupt and stop you so that we keep to time a wee bit, if that's all right. Chantal.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. I need to say we're all going to present, so we partitioned it so that the whole team, can present. So I'm going to start quickly. Okay, on the project background. Now, creating our independent art space in 2020 gave us the possibility to start training and art therapy sessions with women and children who had lost their parents and spouses in the interterritorial war that has been ravaging an already marginalized group of English-speaking Cameroonians since 2016. Going back through memory lane investigates 5 main thematics spread around 2 important moments led by a core group of people. The first explored and archived the history that led to the Anglophone crisis through a series of research field trips and interviews that took shape in the form of visual and sonic documents that will be made available as material and education resources for the public through a website. The moment would investigate 3 thematics. This is the out space of the forest creative loft. So the first thematic was on the dangerosity of one narrative. The team explored the different manifestations of the single story, the single perspective of Cameroon history that has been transmitted from generation to generation in the educational system. 2, on political blindness, heroes, ancestors, and martyrs. The history of Cameroon taught in schools does not include all the figures who have contributed to the creation of the nation. It portrays most of the English historical figures as bad, and this has created a binary situation where French people are good and the English people are bad. On nationhood and coloniality, what does it mean today to belong to Cameroon? We would like, or we open the conversation around nationhood, deconstructing the complexity of that identity, and it's still very tied to colonization. How do we define ourselves outside of that while learning from that historical past? The second moment of 3 months focused on the present and future and open the conversation on what is happening now and how we can start thinking of building a future. The core group carried out workshops with internally displaced people. 2 thematics were investigated. On transversality and going beyond borders to resist. From the team before, we want to move towards thinking as human beings. How do we resist borders, land, language, and history to move forward in a world we are sharing? On living together and solidarity, what future will it be for Cameroon after such a crisis? How can we think of that crisis collectively and not as a Francophone feeling like, oh, this event does not concern us? The last month was dedicated to the implementation of the digital archives and for the final presentation of the project through a symposium during which the archive was activated. Most of our research trip was carried out in Bamenda, which is the northwest part of the country. We also carried out some research in the southwest region, but was more focused on the northwest region, Bamenda. And the Bamenda we visited some months ago, it's no longer what we saw. It's no longer what we saw, with things getting worse. Some examples: on the 11th of February, an artisanal bomb exploded during a march past, wounding 2 kids. On the 20th of May, the mayor of Bui was killed. In April, 5 civilians were killed in Bambwe during an exchange between the secessionists and the state military. Over 6,000 deaths, but the government media doesn't want the rest of the country to be aware. French-speaking citizens actually believe the government is in control of the situation, and media reporting contrary is punished. Now, I will give the floor to Bimela, who's going to talk about the methodology of her research. Bimela?
Yes, Chantal, thank you. And to talk about the methodology, like Chantal has put before, our aim was to collect photographic material, videos, and paper documents, which are strictly related to the causes of the Anglophone crisis over the time. And, one objective also was to create a geographically evolutionary digital repository for the preservation and easy public accessibility of this information, and also to show solidarity and aid in trauma healing process and resilience building for victims because of the atrocities they have witnessed, they have faced, because, you know, when this is a population who have never experienced war, and on the outset of the crisis, when you talk of war, they did not know it meant rape. They did not know war meant, you know, killing. They did not know war meant extortion, kidnappings. But today, they are witnesses and they have experienced that firsthand. That is why we targeted the people who are directly involved, who are the population of Bamenda, Buea, Kumba, Yaoundé, and the city of Douala. It is worth noting that those who are in Yaoundé and Douala are mostly internally displaced persons coming from the Anglophone regions of the country. And we also targeted political leaders and activists, especially those who lived throughout the time of the colonial transition. That is the period when there was when the British got into their ships and left, you know, handing over the Cameroonian their own territory to the French government. And of course, we also, you know, visited the National Archives and the West Cameroon Information Service Photo Archives, which is somehow almost forgotten. That is why you still have the names of the West Cameroon Information Service allocated on it. And in order to, can I go to the next slide, please? In order to get the real story behind this, you know, given that especially the subject is very sensitive, and the government doesn't take it lightly when, you know, you take a position that is contrary to theirs. We had to be very strict on the consent letter in order to make sure that everybody who participated in the interviews was, you know, did it out of their own free will. And that is why the consent letter was, you know, made to cover all these aspects. That is, we needed their signature and the participation of the researcher. We needed them to be to understand the purpose of the study, to understand the potential risk of the study, and to assure them of the benefits, because if they know it's risky, they will first of all think about the benefits, because all of them are tired, all of them want an end to the crisis, but unfortunately, they don't want an end because of the justice they will get, but because they want to stop seeing bloodshed. They want to stop burying their loved ones. And in this type of research, the material we got, or the questionnaire, was largely qualitative, as the data was collected through unstructured questionnaires, which, you know, had mostly descriptive and experiential questions to source or to prompt these participants to explain their daily activities and their daily experiences as far as the crisis is concerned. And it is also worth noting that these questionnaires were very unique, that's with each individual, given that no group of persons had the same experiences. So each time we have to go and meet someone, we need to first of all, you know, understand where the person is coming from and fine-tune the questions in order to be able to get the real stories. Even though at some points, some questions were too sensitive and we could sense some degree of fear in talking, you know, because for them to talk, they would think, who are these people and what exactly do they want to get from us? So in the end, we had video, audio, text resources, and they were classified based on the year the event occurred and the location, that's the geographical location where this event occurred. And from a broad view of our resources, which we have gathered, this clearly demonstrates the recurrent violence over the years resulting from the same political question with no legal, you know, implementations. Because it's one nothing that, like Chantal earlier mentioned, that the crisis started in 2016. It's just another phase of the crisis, because the same events that are happening since 2016 up till date had already happened in the 1990s, specifically in 1991 and 1992, when there was a when there was a change of the constitution in terms of extending the presidential mandate. Can I go to the next slide, please, Chantal? Where I will talk about some findings. Here on the pictures, you can see here is part of the healing process where we decided to gather some women, and also there were some men, to train them on skills which will help them to survive, because being displaced from your home into another town with no handwork, depending only on humanitarian aid can also traumatizing for them. And it's, however, interesting to note that most of these women you're seeing here have given a lot of feedback about how they are using these skills, to improve on their daily lives and to survive. And on the bottom, you can find a picture of Chantal and I, talking to a principal of a public school in the Anglophone region who has fled. This was in Yaoundé, who has fled. He had a broken leg from running, in his house. He heard gunshots and was trying to run into the bush, and he fell down due to age, and he had a broken leg. And we could sense, that aspect of fear in him when he was talking, recounting the stories, and we could understand the reasons why. Chantal, can I go to the next? So, based on the material we gathered, we discovered that this crisis in the Anglophone regions is being called by so many appellations. Some people call it the Anglophone crisis. You might be reading, you see the Anglophone revolution or the Anglophone problem. You might see just the struggle, and you might see the fight for independence or terrorist activities, depending on who is addressing the situation. But, all these appellations of what is depicted by the Anglophone crisis by all writers, and researchers is not actually per se, true, because it all depicts what is known as the marginalization, exploitation, and assimilation, and, the domination of Anglophones by the French-dominated regime, which, started since 1961, after the reunification of the Republic of Cameroon and the British Southern Cameroons. I say it is not true, because all of these descriptions are just a manifestation of, of the cause. What is really the cause of the problem? Chantal, can I go to the next slide? No, it's okay. Because still talking about the cause. No, Chantal, yeah. Still talking about the cause, there is these two main items, which we, from the discussions, from the interviews we had with our participants, we noticed the non-respect of the constitutional provisions that were arrived at the Fumban conference during the July 1961, UN stipulated talks between the two states. At this period of time, they were still referred to as the two states. And regrettably, this union between the Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon underwent several political modifications from the federal structure that was adopted in 1961 to a unitary state in 1972. I would like to quickly, explain to you these maps that were presented to us by a politician who tried to take us through, just from the maps to understand where the grievances are coming from. As you can see, these are 4 maps that the English-speaking Cameroonians have, respected from 1972. You can see to the bottom left, you will see the map of British Southern Cameroons under British rule. That was just indicated there by a bunch of banana with the British Cameroon's inscription. And then after that, they went back into their Cameroonian identity. And when the federal government was initiated, the colors did not change, but 2 stars were added onto the flag, as you can see from the flag on the top right. And then after that, in 1973, there was an unconstitutional change from a federal state into a unitary state, with and that was the main cause and the start of killings, because there were a lot of protests against this. And I believe that that is, from all the conversations we had, this is the turning point of the crisis of today, which is the forceful, the unconstitutional change of the form of government to what we have today. One star in the flag you have at the bottom right, which is the unitary state of Cameroon we have today. So I would like Chantal to play, a presentation by Oat. Oat is not able to be with us now, but Oat is trying to explain to us the relationship or the result of this, our research, from an artistic perspective. Chantal, please. Chantal, do you have it, or we are facing some difficulties?
Sorry.
Can you so that we understand?
Yes, I'm trying to. I don't know. Hold on. Let me reduce this. Yeah.
In that case, I think Hamlet can go on, and
Okay,
then
I'll stop. Just hold on. Okay, yeah, Hamlet.
Yes, Hamlet, please. Hamlet can,
Hello. Sorry, I'm traveling, so I'll just like maybe shut my video so we can listen. You can hear me very well. So I'll be picking up on the lesson learned from this project, which was very vital and important. So it is true that we had a more broader scope of the project in terms of the implementation process, but we did not actually see that what we're starting to do was important, but was more bigger than what we're seeing. So some of the lessons learned was the fact that the data we're collecting, it is true that we needed accurate data, but in the process, the kind of data we needed wasn't what's happening? The data that we're collecting were not like complete, in the sense of like we needed to interview people, and we never knew that in the course of interviewing and collecting materials for the web archive online was something we'll just go and interview people and they will come and they will give us, but we never knew there was something like a procedure where we have to go back and follow up on collecting this material, maybe one by one, one at a time, to feed the website with it. So to feed the website with it, we never saw that coming. And that thing we actually faced, like something that we think we learned from, was the climate. The climate also, we never knew that at a certain point in time, climate also could affect us, because there were some times that there were serious rainfalls. As a team and as a group, whenever we're going on the field to collect data, sometimes we're faced with challenges, and we were not kind of accurately prepared in terms of the kind of dresses we are supposed to be on the field with and all the rest. Also, the situation whereby we see the women, where when we were going to interview, we thought that they were the ones being most important to us, but the other aspect of it is that we realized that they instead saw us to be like the messiahs and their God. Like, actually, finally someone is here who will listen to us and will bring our story to limelight for everybody to hear about what we are going through and that we are tired. This we were not really expecting, but we get to understand the fact of the importance of going back to those who have been victims, those who have been touched by this very crisis in Cameroon, to bringing out their voice, how they could feel. We saw it like some sort of kind of like a reparation, but a more of a psychological reparation that most of the victims were feeling. even the time of interaction, from the trainings, from the exchanges we're having as individuals, from the team and those were the victims. It was so kind of beyond what we're expecting. So we learned from that. Maybe if in case this project, maybe tomorrow is to continue, we will kind of like expand the way we interact with them and continue to amplify their voices to the situations they are going through at the level of at the level of grassroots and those who have been victims of this crisis in Cameroon that is not talked about. We note on.
Sorry to interrupt, Hamlet. We're gonna have to move on shortly. Are there final observations that you or the team wants to make? Just because I can see you've got some kind of conclusions there.
Yeah.
I think we'll continue with Yvonne Lange, who's going to introduce the website. It's true that we also had a video of a recap of the symposium that we did that we wanted to show. So I don't know if we'll have time to do that. So we have that and also the presentation of the website. Is that possible?
I think if you just post the link to the video, because they're not playing brilliantly through Zoom anyway. So I think if you post the link, that's the best thing with the video. But if you want to show us the website briefly, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, Yvonne Lange.
Yes, I'm here. I do not necessarily have the right to share my screen, which I had a few minutes ago. I don't know if that's possible to. Yeah, it's fine. I have it. So, do you see my screen?
We do. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible without going too much into the details. So, my name is Yvonne. I'm happy to be here. My role in the project was translating most of this sort of work and field work into the form of a website. Basically, the overall methodology that was mentioned a few minutes ago by Ben was sort of interpreted in a visual form. The memory, the True Memory Lane .com platform, which is finally the naming that we decide, is a sort of an archive platform that sort of will be having photographs, videos, and what we call voices. Originally, this was designed to be sound material, as well as scan and resources. So on the homepage, this is basically what the visitor is greeted with. The four sections of the website are displayed here. On the first sort of row is all of this archival material, and then the second row is mostly those voices and témoignages and witnesses, and then finally a space dedicated to sort of all the parallel events. I'm just going to go through quickly how the templates and the layout looks like. All of this is still in progress because that archival and metadata conversation is being applied here in a more friendly way. So basically, the photo and image archive looks like this, where the visitor can actually access the material in such a way. So with video material, this sort of displays a bit more, I don't want to say funky, but a bit more animated to sort of maybe make it a little bit vivid. Conversation are, from a design point of view, being held to see how this can be improved. Maybe a few words to finish about maybe a few words just to finish about how the voices and witnesses page looks like, where basically you can actually listen
the education where we
to,
figure for on picking the one figure again.
yeah.
So one then they don't.
Most of the time, but depending on who is the interviewee, in Pidgin English, from the field, or in English. So this is actually accessible, but in terms of the communication of the website and the marketing of the website, a few adjustments should be made by then, also to be in alignment with both the politics of the website and sort of all ethical materials around it. So, of course, this begs for more time for explanation because the time is short. I just wanted to give you a sort of quick idea of what this is about. So yeah, I'll probably end it there because I think I have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and to the whole team. I've had a chance to go through some of that archive, and it is a phenomenal amount of material, and the stories are incredible. So I really recommend to others to have a good go through it because it's really, really impressive. So thank you very, very much to everyone. I'm sorry we don't have more time for more kind of discussion of it. We have time for one quick question if anyone's got one. But we are up against it in terms of time, unfortunately. No. Okay. In that case, thank you very much again to the Memory Lane team and Creative Loft team. It's been really, really interesting to hear your reflections on an immensely complex topic. So thank you very much, everyone. Next up, we have Martha, who will be presenting the work on Pillars of Rectitude. Martha, are you there? Okay.
Yes, I'm fine. I'm here, Ben.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm not sure I can see you yet. There. No.
Okay.
You able
You'll
to
see me very briefly, and then when I share my screen,
Brilliant.
I'll disappear because I like to manage the internet situation.
Lovely. While you're doing that, Martha is with the Njibala Foundation, and they've been working on a project called Pillars of Rectitude, which again is really, really rich in terms of what it's brought through the network. You able to share okay there, Martha?
I think we lost Martha for a second.
Dear. No, she's not on the call at all at the minute. Okay.
It seems like Martha's having technical.
In that case, what we will do, moving through the agenda, is we'll take our break now. So if we have a quick 10-minute break now and we come back at 2:42 or whatever hour you happen to be on, so 42 minutes past the hour, we'll come back, and at that point, hopefully we've got Martha back and we'll continue on through the agenda at that point. Okay, see you back at 42 minutes past. Those of you enjoying a leisurely coffee, I'll entice you back to your screens. So we'll recommence. Okay. So technical issues fixed. Delighted to have Martha to present her work, her team's work, and give us an insight into some of the work they've been doing through Pillars of Rectitude. So over to you, Martha. I think I
To
can
unmute myself and then share. Okay.
I knew that's what was happening.
All right, let's do this. Are we there now?
Yeah, I can see your screen now.
Perfect. So yeah, so my name is Martha Kazungu, and I am the founding director of Njabala Foundation. Before I speak about our project, Pillars of Rectitude, Women Artists of the 1960s in Africa, I'm going to just briefly say what Njabala Foundation is. Njabala Foundation was founded in 2021 by myself to promote visibility for women artists. We are based in Uganda, and we promote this visibility through different aspects, notably research, exhibition making, community engagement, and mentorship. So for the Pillars of Rectitude project, we were inspired by discovering two articles in the Transition magazine, which is one of the earliest magazines in Uganda that was founded in the early 60s. And I think this was 2020 when I was looking at the magazine, and I discovered that they had published the work of two women artists from East Africa, that is Rebecca Njau, The Scar, which is a play, and Fatima Abdullah's poem and slash, not sure if it's a poem, if the poem is hers, but definitely the illustration helicopter was hers. So I was quite intrigued to see that, you know, as early as then, women artists were being featured in such a important journal, transition magazine. But although The Scar was quite clear, I mean, it's a play that talks about the predicament of women, then notably about, you know, female genital mutilation in East Africa, in Kenya, where Njau is born. On the other side, Abdullah's poem and image were not, for me, very systematic in that they were not, they did not, it wasn't quite clear if the poem was by her or she was just invited to illustrate, and the editor of the volume just, you know, thought that these two could move together, and that the artwork was called Helicopter, and this, you know, it looks like some kind of fish if you look closely. I mean, it was, for me, very, very ambivalent. And this was actually the beginning of this inquiry. And then I thought, look, if these two women artists were featured in this journal, who else were the women artists of the time in Africa? And where can we find their, you know, the archives? Where can we find records of their work? Where can we find, you know, whatever footage of their existence? And this is how Pillars of Rectitude project was conceived. When I did a little digging, I discovered that, you know, Rebecca Njau had written her memoir and several other novels. And Fatima Abdullah, on the other hand, you know, just was erased almost completely. Nothing really left. Her name was repeatedly misspelled, even in important journals and in publications. And so I thought this is actually something worth digging in. And as I said, Njawala Foundation is a very, very small organization, and a research project like this has to be broken down into phases for us to be able to do justice to the theme. And so what Right for Time funded was the phase 1, which I'm going to, I think, focus on in this presentation, but just to give you an overview that the whole project is still happening today, and we've broken it down into smaller achievable phases. So currently in phase 2, which also had a symposium and also having publications and funding and partnerships allowing, shall have phase 3, maybe in 3, 4, 5 years from now, in which we shall bring together all the findings into an exhibition and publication. Now I focus on phase 1. So phase 1, the methodology was that we invited 4 women artists that you see right now on the screen: Letaro Dwalega, Viola Nimuhamia, Charity Atkunda, and Liz Kobsinge, to investigate the work and life of 4 specific women artists from East Africa. And their role was to literally dig the archives and find as much as they could on these artists and present about whatever they found in the symposium, which was culminating at the end of the project. And this picture just gives you an impression of the symposium, which was held on 9th of June, 2023, which is also Heroes Day in Uganda. And we're just thinking about, you know, these women whose histories had been erased and yet should be recognized. So also selecting the day for the event was quite, for us, instrumental. And just another photograph of, you know, Liz Kobsinge speaking about the work of Rebecca Njau. Yeah. So these are the artists who were researched on at length. So Rosemary Karuga Namuli was researched on by Viola Nimuhamia, Teresa Musoke by Letaro Dwalega, Esteli, Betty Manyolo by Charity Atkunda, and Rebecca Njau by Liz Kobsinge. And in the next slides, I'm just gonna give you a very brief insight, or at least impression, maybe not insight, impression of the works that some of which were discovered, and we continue to discover more, by the way. Another thing that was really very nice about this project is that the more research we release to the world, the more people reach out to us saying, look, we have this archive of this woman artist. Are you interested? So it's an ongoing inquiry until now, even if the project is, considerably finished. So I'm going to start with, a few collages by Rosemary Karuga, that you can just have a quick look. Selected works. I'm not going to talk about them because then my time is very, very limited, but so you just peruse through. And I'm just also going to show you some works by Teresa Msoke, Ugandan artist. Very, very early works of the artist. As you can see, they are really well spread across, the world. Some of them are in Royal College Art in London. And the sculpture is located at the Makerere University Art School, and the untitled "The Girl in the Hat" is courtesy of the Artist Gallery. Another sample of the other artists is Estelle Betty Magnolo, that you can see some works. Unfortunately, most of the works for Estelle are in the US. Just the work on my left is currently part of the Makerere Art Gallery collection. But as you can see, it's in a very, very sorry state. So the chance that it survives the next years, decades is, quite not sure. And finally, but not least, some works of Fatima Shaban Abdullah that we have found in different collections. So the Kanga design was found in a catalog that she created of a show she did in 1980s, and the feeding monkey is also in a collection in the US, the Harmon Foundation. And the work to my left is supposed to be part of the Makerere art collection, but the work went missing. So no one knows where the work is as of now. And Rebecca Njau is most notably known as an author, but she also did a lot of art, including, decorating or painting on clay, and also textile design. And these are pictures that were taken very recently and during a studio visit at her home in Nairobi. So lessons learned. So recently we were approached by Right for Time with a small grant to, kind of show visual outputs from the whole project. And we thought for us it would be very, very important to, ask people who are part of the project to respond with comments or any kind of feedback on their experience. So for example, this is one of the responses we got from Liz Kopsinge. The Appeal of the Virtued Symposium was a rich place of sharing. I believe that experiencing such a generous space during which we accessed important scholarship about the rich histories and movements of women artists in East Africa has been a crucial catalyst to my practice and how I continue to conduct research. This is another testimony from another artist, Victoria Navlime. I'll not read because it's really in detail, but the value of this is that everyone who we asked almost, say something very, very instrumental about like how relevant the project is in, reclaiming time for the artists we considered and the artists we continue to consider in the other phases of the project. This that you see right now on the screen is another testimonial from a culture producer, Rashida Nalumoso, talking about, how East Africa particularly has been left out in several artistry discourses. And in comparison to, Southern Africa and Western Africa, we continue to, stay behind. And this is this project also makes it very, very apparent the challenges, of readership, of scholarship, and also of existence of archives that people interested can actually access. So this is basically really like re-echoing the relevance of the project and why the work we're doing is actually important. So I've used 12 minutes. I'm going to very quickly speak about phase 2, which is ongoing right now, so phase 1, as I said, was women artists from 1960s in East Africa, and phase 2 is really about Africa, the whole continent, and we are collaborating with Aware to do this, and particularly we are commissioning artisans to write biographies of select women artists from Africa from the 60s, and all the names you see on the screen currently can be accessed on the Aware website. Eventually, they will also on the Njawala website and perhaps also in the publication. But just to give you like the mapping of the different artists from different parts of the world, of the continent, from Algeria, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda. And we are continuously mapping, looking for, asking people from all over to nominate or just give us names of artists whom they know from the time. Since I have 7 minutes, I'm going to just see if it's possible to give you an impression for the symposium. And if it works.
The sound isn't coming through, Martha. Is the sound important?
Oh, the sound.
Yeah, you have to share it a particular way through Zoom to make sure the sound comes through Zoom.
Okay. I'm not sure I'll manage that.
Okay. Perhaps
But
again.
if not possible, I'll just share with you then the link, and then people
Perfect.
can look at and then we use the time to just ask questions and answer instead.
That sounds like a great use of time, because I'm sure people will have questions. I have questions if
to have all of you here today. We know that it's a public holiday and it's a Friday. So I just want to copy the link. Wait, let me first stop sharing.
Yeah. In the meantime, does anyone want to start with a question for Martha? My question, maybe to start us, is
it's beginning to rain on my face, so I don't know if I can hear you.
Okay, hopefully I can overshout the rain. What do you think? So there's so many of these women have been lost to time, and their art has been lost to time. You're obviously really close to it. What do you think that tells us about the relationship between time and gender in particular?
Well, I think your essay is not like a separate question. It's one of the avenues through which women are repeatedly abused, erased, forgotten. So it's not just about time, it's about even now as we speak, like how many women artists are known, how many women artists' works are at the back of our minds, in our collections, in our galleries. Like this project just makes it real, so real how this erasure continues to manifest today. So I think it's just, for me, like the continuation of the trauma of being a woman, if you like, that this project just kind of heightens, if you like, because it just shows that this has been happening for 5 decades and we're still grappling with the same questions.
Yeah. Anyone else other questions? Zoe, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Martha. I always love hearing about this project. It's so exciting. I just wanted to ask you, what is important about artists, researching artists, and what is it that artists tell us about time in the context of this project and the wider Rights for Time network? Thank you.
Actually, that's something we kind of wanted to coin in this project, like qualifying artistic research as a methodology. And there was a tone to it that was so beautiful in the presentations, because there's some kind of intuition also that informed like the erasures, because as you can imagine, many of these artists are long deceased, and their families have no clue what their practices was like or even where their works are. So in these very, very enormous gaps, it had to take intuition from the women artists now to kind of think, for themselves what could have been, in that erasure. And that manifested very, very beautifully, very, very poetically in the presentation, but also questioned that artists today, of what they're leaving behind, that 10 years from now or 20 years from today, what of their archive is visible if someone is interested suddenly in their work. So yeah, I think it was it was a very powerful tool to like enable artists research, other artists. And for the cases of artists who are still alive, like for the case of Rebecca Njau and for the case of Teresa Msoke, it was so like it was so special having the artists like meet them and like ask them about this time. I don't know if you hear me, the rain is now like,
We can hear you well. We can hear you very well.
Yeah, and like, so it was so many layers, to be honest, of like communion, of like research, of interaction, but also of like reflection and response. So it all came together very, very beautifully, very emotional. I mean, people were crying at a symposium. And myself, inclusive, I was like, I couldn't believe it, And also like, because we allowed this intuition to rule, and we also allowed like the, I don't know, the artistic character of the artist to kind of be something to leverage in the whole project. And that did not have any like modules of like do it like this or do it like that. That it was so open, and the outcomes were phenomenal. I think about time, I don't know what to say. It was so surreal. Zoe. I don't know. Yeah, and the artists still grapple because of, actually, I think the thing I should say right now that you're asking about time is how short-lived the project was, and how until now they are burdened with like wanting to find out more and more and more. And so it's like that irony of time, like how it's always not enough and how it's always too much at the same time. Debating about 5 decades. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, oxymorons, if you like.
Thank you. And last question from Tamaris.
Yes, hi, thank you, Marta, for this amazing work and for curating this amazing legacy. I was only interested in your website, and I wanted to know whether you also share unpublished texts, or when you publish some of the work of the artists, is it only published and already disseminated, and how do you go about navigating this sphere between the published and the unpublished, the visible and the invisible, so to say? Thank you.
Okay, now I don't hear you. Sorry, that rain is too much on my side. But the idea is to eventually, publish everything online, but after the end of the project. So as we get here and here, we post a few impulses from the project, but like yeah, I'm shouting. Sorry, I cannot.
Not to worry, Martha.
No worries.
We're overwhelmed by the resilience of everyone on the project, that they can overcome even the rain. But we'll not not push it too much further. Thank you very, very much. Really, really rich project and really rich presentation as well to hear so much in such a short time. So thank you very much, Martha. We are moving swiftly on through our agenda. And next, I'm delighted to introduce Tamaris Fakouri, who has a presentation for us on a sub-project within the network, which is on peace and trust. So Tammy, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Ben. For those who do not know me, I'm the lead co-investigator on the policy time strand at Rights for Time. And additionally, I've also been doing some research on peace and trust. So in this short presentation, I will highlight the key aspects of the Mobilizing Peace and Trust project. And then I hope to pass the discussion on to Nora, who I hope is with us today. That's what Anela just confirmed, and who will present the main takeaways and insights from our interviews on peace and trust. Apologies for not showing some slides. I'm currently traveling and I faced earlier some delays that impacted my planning. So let's start with some background. As some of you might know, the UN designated 2021 as the International Year of Peace and Trust. So in response to a funding call which aimed to tackle the challenges highlighted by the UN Declaration, we submitted our proposal on peace and trust. And ironically enough, 2021 was marked by simultaneous crises and by the breakdown of citizens' trust in their governments. So studies indicate, for instance, that the management of the health crisis, vaccine distribution, economic setbacks, and stalled and disrupted conflict resolution processes have diminished trust in governments, international organizations, and health authorities across both the global north and the global south. So against this rather challenging background, we set out to explore constellations of trust and mistrust. Our aim was really to initiate a conversation on trust and peace across our 5 case studies: Kenya, Rwanda, Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon, and to understand how communities conceive and articulate trust building vis-a-vis governments and international actors. Let me first talk to you about the research background that inspired this project. I'm sure you all know that trust is a very elusive and complex concept. Trust means so many different things. You know, we can talk about personal trust, institutional trust, social trust. Also, trust can be an emotional state, but it's also a result of diligent, hard work and enduring relationships that cultivate bonding, friendships, dignity, and also a sense of economic, political, and historical justice. Extensive research has focused on trust building and trust in institutions and governments in the global north. The OECD, for instance, states that trust, and here I quote, is a crucial component of growth, societal well-being, and governance. Yet what we noticed is that there is a scant local and indigenous research and data on the connections between trust, peace, resilience, and well-being in the countries we are examining. So oftentimes the indicators used to measure trust are largely influenced by the language, the epistemology established by international organizations or Western-centric research frameworks. So it's common to hear people, you know, in Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Rwanda discuss their trust or distrust in governing bodies and the international community. But how do expressions of trust and distrust impact peacemaking? How do they fluctuate over time? And in conflict-affected areas, can trust in governments and international powers be built and regained through the delivery of quality services, the implementation of reforms, and the fulfillment of promises? Or does trust really deeply intertwine with intricate historical and post-colonial legacies that cannot be, you know, made and unmade overnight? And so also, how do vertical forms of trust, such as trust between citizens and the state, and horizontal forms of trust, such as trust among research communities, policy communities, you know, communities among themselves, how does this horizontal form of trust also influence peace processes? So these questions are complex and I don't have definitive answers. I'd love perhaps to take this in the discussion later, but I'd like to share with you some insights and key findings from our project. So as I said, through qualitative group interviews at workshops and ethnographic participation at Rights for Time meetings, we wanted to turn the Rights for Time network into a reflexive site of learning about trust and mistrust. And our case studies provided so much empirical content. So the first takeaway is the following. Our respondents, both researchers but also practitioners, describe trust and mistrust as multi-level, multi-scalar, and multidimensional. So we can mistrust institutions, research, local governments, elections, healthcare services. We can also trust or mistrust the UN agencies. However, it's important to understand how various forms of trust and mistrust interconnect and evolve over time and space. So systematic and cross-comparative research is here necessary to fully comprehend how trust is established or eroded. So this is inspiration for a follow-up project on peace and trust. Our second takeaway is the following. Although our project initially aimed to explore peace and trust, we gained deeper insights into their opposites, mistrust and conflict. So most research associates we talked to concurred that recognizing the manifestations of mistrust is essential to understanding what peace and trust look like. So a recurring theme in the Rights for Time project was the need to examine how persistent shortcomings in humanitarian aid and protection contribute to creating mistrust and to creating a sense of contentious or conflictual peace. Some research participants suggested monitoring broken promises, prolonged waiting, and extended dealings with international organizations and governments. So they also asked, given these issues, can local and people-centric actors or organizations overcome mistrust and address grievances? And what power do they have at their disposal? So here are some illustrative examples or vignette stories that I'd like to share with you and that illustrate our findings on trust and mistrust and that are really inspired from our case studies from a longitudinal perspective. I'd like to start with Palestine. So in Palestine, our researchers contrasted the long-term perspective that's needed to gain and build trust on the one hand, and the accumulated failures of international intervention, as well as the short-term modality of international funding on the other hand. So the short-term focus of humanitarian governance stands in stark contrast to community-led efforts, which require significant time to develop and sustain. This creates a mismatch between the grassroots trust-building process and the fleeting nature of humanitarian interventions that are often policy-led, of course, and disconnected from the context. Let me move on to another illustrative story, Jordan. In Jordan, our researchers discussed the significance of language, labeling, categorization, and the role in creating artificial divides that erode trust. So as we all know, historically, Jordan has served as a place of refuge for various communities. Within this framework, the international community has established a complex system of labeling and categorizing refugees versus host communities. Funding mechanisms like the EU-Jordan Compact signed in 2016, for instance, tended to concentrate on certain refugee groups, such as Syrians in this case, while overlooking others, overlooking overlapping displacements. Historically, also refugees are regarded as guests in Jordan, which carries somehow a positive informal connotation within the Jordanian context. However, as one of the researchers pointed out, mistrust emerges when aid comes into the picture. The seeds of mistrust are sown as international aid agencies and governments foment divisions and introduce terminologies that at times seek to reverse or undo historical and organic relationships. And this is a problem. So it is crucial, according to our Jordanian case study, to understand how the artificial nature of policy language, policy discursive practices foster mistrust over time. In the interest of time, I will touch on one last vignette story, and then I will give the floor to Nora. So the case of Lebanon, which has recently endured a perfect storm of crises, is really a significant and revelatory case of how, trust and mistrust are complex constellations to untangle and understand. So from economic collapse to the Beirut explosions, these events have eroded the resilience of both refugees and citizens, prompting lately dangerous journeys across the Mediterranean. So these crises did not arise suddenly or overnight. They can be traced to complex legacies that we have been interested in dissecting or unraveling. So on the one hand, we have the history of violent foreign interventions. And on the other hand, we have Lebanon's resilient sectarian politics that has been paradoxically resilient at the expense of people's time. And this politics of sectarianism has fostered a culture of impunity. So this leads to a situation where many of our respondents said that they can no longer trust the system. So it's not possible to talk even about trust or to recover trust in this perspective. So in this scenario, mistrust and conflictual peace continue to mutually reinforce each other. As a final reflection before I hand over to Nora, I'd like to say that we do not intend to view these countries or these case studies solely through the lens of conflict or mistrust. Still, what we found out is that trying to understand what trust is requires really understanding and unpacking the nature of mistrust and also unraveling how mistrust can aid us in fostering trust. I will stop here and I will pass the discussion to my colleague Nora. Thank you for your time and I look forward to your questions later on. Thanks for listening. Nora, over to you.
Hi, Ben. How much time do we have left?
3 or 4 minutes, that's all right.
Okay. So I'm going to zoom through these. So as part of Tammy's project, we took the network as a case study and wanted to understand how trust and mistrust were navigated through the project and to understand the relationship between these projects and concepts of peace. So we asked 4 kind of basic questions, which the vignettes, some of the vignettes come from, but basically sort of establishing what is your definition of success? What is the relationship between success and peace, and how does mistrust shape the landscape of your work? 3 major themes. 1, the relationship between peace and success made peace tangible. So everybody's answers were around like actionable visions, but this actually meant a kind of splitting between a sort of vague concept of peace and something that was meaningful to each of the projects. Trust as trauma repair. Where trust was an active process that recognized historical legacies of injustice and actively tried to create a context where repair was being done to this larger colonial legacy. And then we found some really interesting things around the scaling of trust and how trust can be established in sort of small one-to-one communities, one-to-one relationships, and then scaled across the network. So I've got lots of information and little time, so I will kind of blast through. Where peace as tangible, most of the people interviewed broke peace down into this umbrella kind of abstract concept, which was either sort of politicized and not very useful, or just too abstract to actually mean anything on a day-to-day basis. And so individuals, as Tammy mentioned, broke things down into a kind of multifaceted piece where you can have piece here and here and here. And then also others broke it down into this kind of external political piece and then also internal piece that individuals could actually control. So peace became tangible. Around trust as trauma repair, this was foremost a recognition of historical inequalities and the bases of mistrust. That trust and the continuing sort of checking back and forth and making sure trust was in place, processes of questioning and accountability meant trust was actively repairing in this little microcosm some of the historical legacies that the project was built upon. We had one interviewer note that, right, we work within a really problematic, uneven context, and we need to address this constantly. And so it's not something that exists or is created and maintained, but it is it is a sort of agentive process. And then also success means addressing mistrust. It means sort of looking squarely at the problems and actually coming around and creating kind of joint goals around fixing mistrust, right? At sort of from down up. First at listening to local communities, at addressing the needs of local communities, and then making sure everybody kind of up the chain was also listening, paying attention, and making sure that those kind of local things were possible. So finally, scaling trust, and hopefully some of this will be on the project website so you can dig in later down the line. Organizational trust was, again, this kind of ongoing process, and it was built of several different kind of components. One, over time, building a language of trust so that there were easy code words, there were easy ways to refer to things that had happened and solutions that were achieved, and you could kind of bridge them and address them and signal them kind of quickly and signaling kind of mutual work done in the past. Sort of formal and informal processes of checking up, as one respondent put it, where the sort of naive, well-meaning sort of systems in place were actually saying, well, nope, that's not working, and transparent moments and flexible moments where we can say that's not working and we need to do something differently. And again, transparency and accountability across historic hierarchies, right? So that this wasn't always sort of, bottom up was given like the widest possible avenue. But when mistakes were made, there were opportunities to redress and assess. And then, of course, one-to-one personal relationships of trust, that these were established in the network by and large between kind of initial researchers and organizations, and those relationships of trust created the kind of larger atmosphere of trust that was sort of somehow transferred across the network. And of course, but again, this was continuously worked for. And then, of course, leadership modeling. So where individuals in leadership positions were modeling, kind of being checked, like, oh, I've done something wrong. What do I do? Seeking advice, seeking assistance, seeking sort of consensus, right? This provides a context where trust can be sort of maintained and achieved, and processes are modeled kind of around in leadership positions, and then also sort of spread out and create a larger kind of environment of trust. Of course, this trust as a process means that it's not always guaranteed, right? There were, as Ben has mentioned, it's come up quite a few times, right? There have been hitches. It hasn't been a perfect process, but the importance of open channels of communication, of willingness to sort of admit mistakes and address mistakes as part of the learning process, again, around that kind of common goal of achieving something that listens to individuals on the ground, and making space for the amplification of that kind of work. And so I will stop there. And if there are any questions for Tamris, or I'm also happy to answer.
Thank you both very much. A huge amount of work and really, really rich as well. And we have time for a quick question. If anyone has a burning question they'd like to ask about the work. Just look in the chat. Okay. as I say, it's very rich work. So if anyone's got a bit of digesting to do and wants to post their question into the chat, I think that's probably, I'm sure you'll both be able to answer in the chat if that's okay. And otherwise, thank you again for the work and for presenting it to us. And we'll move on to Renee, if that's okay, who's going to give us an update on the work that her and her colleagues have been doing. Hi, Renee. Over to you.
Super. Can you?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I am the leader of the Revolution Against PowerPoint. So this is not a particularly detailed PowerPoint presentation, but I hope that it will give you an introduction to our project, which we haven't actually started. So it's an interesting position to be in, to be kind of projecting into a future temporality. And it very much fits into our practice at Wadi Chafu Collective, thinking with how to create archives in non-linear timelines. So the project that we are doing for now is entitled The Bed That Lodges the Shipwrecked, the bed in the sense of bedrock, but also bed as a reference to domestic space. And the proposed project is a documentary film that is poised to delve deep into the compelling narratives of women who were entrenched in the vibrant tapestry of cross-border trade between Rwanda and the DRC. These resilient women navigate intricate webs of socioeconomic and political landscapes and steer their businesses amidst a myriad of challenges, seizing unique opportunities along the way. What I want to do here today is kind of think through a methodology with you, because what we are proposing at the moment, or what we are attempting to interrogate at the moment, is a methodology, but also in many respects to establish a manifesto for how this project might work. Whether or not that will actually happen, I guess, remains to be seen. So in many respects, we propose a project which we hope will function as an interdisciplinary meeting space to question the documentary act itself. We hope to try and think about this film project as a meeting place dedicated to critically questioning the documentary gesture itself, cutting across the boundaries that traditionally pigeonhole documentary into rigid genres. And in that respect, I would like to show you some work that we've done before that thinks mostly with archives as a way to think through a process of memory work and reference the ways in which the past is mediated in the present. So I will play this video if I can.
Elemente wollen in der kommenden Nacht das Büro des Sozialistischen Deutschen Studentenbundes SDS in Westberlin in Brand stecken. Diese Attentatsdrohung im Zusammenhang mit dem Widerstand gegen den im Filmtheater Astor laufenden Rassenhetzerfilm Afrika Adio ging dem SDS heute Vormittag telefonisch zu. Zugleich drohte der Anrufer, hinter dem offensichtlich eine neofaschistische Gruppe steht, allen Demonstranten und Gegnern des Films bei Demonstrationen heute Abend den Kopf einzuschlagen. In dem Film, der schon in den vergangenen 48 Stunden Gegenstand heftiger Protestdemonstrationen war, wird gegen die Völker Afrikas gehetzt, die als Untermenschen und blutrünstig verunglimpft werden. Die Freie Deutsche Jugend in Westberlin hat verlangt, das Machwerk ebenso wie in London zu verbieten.
Der Film Afrika Adio soll nach dem Willen des Westberliner Senats nun doch in einem anderen Kino weitergezeigt werden. Selbstherrlich setzt er sich damit über die einhellige
Thank you. Yes, that film is in German. I don't speak German either, so yes, nobody here unless you speak German, I don't think that it's particularly important that anybody understands what exactly is being said in the film. But it was very much an experiment thinking about how memory work in post-colonial Africa has often followed the imperial formula of remembrance, right? Being national holidays, national days of commemoration, public monuments, museums, exhibitions, and even school curricula, which all fall into the remit of aligning citizens with perceived agreed upon values and remembering the past. And these forms of transmission essentially create a state memory that situates a citizen's identity within its sovereign sense of heritage. What Bell calls a governing mythology, which is a form of transition or a memory that is applied from above. In thinking about the Rwanda-DRC border, and especially at this peculiar political moment where Rwanda and the DRC may or may not be in conflict, we have had to think a lot about what it might be to encounter communities who live the reality of always carefully navigating the actualities that state governing mythologies and state memory produce in a physical landscape, such as the borders at Gisenyi and Bukavu, respectively. So last but not least, I guess, let me see if I have another slide. I don't know whose children those are. These are, I don't know these children. They came with the slide, but yeah, just to say that we're hoping that the next steps of these projects will help us rethink the documentary attitude conceptually, formally, and methodologically, and help us to make a decentralized and deformatted polycentric documentary, even if we assume that we might not necessarily succeed. And I know International Lit will be a bit nervous to hear me say that. So lastly, I wanted to show you a documentary format that Zoe Norridge and I kind of played around with and proposed for one of the presentations that we did for the Right to Time project in Nyabageni in 2020, I want to say 21. It might be 22 as well. 22, yes. And I think in that context, we were thinking very much with the community and how the proposals and the propositions that they might make in documenting themselves. But it was also really interesting to see how and what choices they made when in front of the camera. And I must say that in my own practice, it's very rare that I actually film people. So this was, in some respects, like one of the first experiments that I did with working with, I suppose, living subjects, if I can say that. Usually I work with the archives, and the archives are old enough that most of the people in them quite likely are no longer living. So just a little clip to show you what Nyabageni was like. And I know Zoe has already spoken about it before, but there's a lot of lessons that I personally have taken from the period in Nyabageni that I think will be instrumental in thinking through how we might approach a community of women who are experts in their region, in their field, in their work, and propose to make a permanent document of them, whether or not, without knowing necessarily whether or not this is desired. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renee. And anyone who is watching Kirsten's.
Sorry. Should I not play that? Okay, we can move on. It's fine.
If you want to play a couple of minutes of it, we have time for that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really cute. I promise.
Okay.
abazungu bari umujemo muri benshi
I think it's disappeared. I don't know if that, anyway, I think we're also at time. So just want to thank you again, Renee, for giving us, I know, a very brief flavor of the work, and also setting us up very well for our last presentation of the day, which is thinking towards the future and thinking towards what comes next. And I know your work's ongoing, and Rana is here just to give us a very brief sense of what comes next and what the legacy of the network might look like. So over to you, Rana, if I can.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, peace upon you all. I'm really honored to be part of this network and to be part of this group. These are the last few minutes of the summit of the third day. And I'm going to, on behalf of me and Heather and all the team, I'm going to share a few words about the legacy and how we're going to go forward. First of all, I'm in awe. I mean, attending and listening to the different talks in the past 3 days have humbled me, have reminded me of our humanity, and has given me hope, especially in this very, very dire time. Rights for Time has been going on, I think it's 5 years now. It feels like our child. We've been in it. Many of us have from the inception, and others who have joined on board over time. It has gone through challenges, funding challenges, pandemics, now wars, Gaza, and before that, Ukraine and Sudan and other atrocities around the world. But we have been able to survive. We have been able to adapt. We have demonstrated agility. And most importantly, what has really brought us to is our agency of taking responsibility and moving forward. But we've learned a lot of lessons on the way. We've learned the value of human relations. We're human. And in that sense, we are very diverse. But every piece of that diversity is important and relevant, and we need it. And this is not just storytelling and narratives and observations. This is steeped in biology, in who we are and what makes us human. So my research, I work on epigenetics. And what we've discovered is that when people are exposed to trauma, especially violent trauma, it's not that we turn on and off genes because of that. Actually, what happens is that we turn our whole regulatory system for regulating gene expression shifts to make us more comfortable with ambiguity, to make us more comfortable with change. And that is that's the adaptation and the agency that makes us survive, flourish, and even thrive. And I think these are the lessons that we've seen demonstrated within this wonderful, amazing network of Rights for Time. The other thing is the global reach of this network. I mean, it started with 5 countries, and now it's in over 15 countries. The diverse dimensions of this network, right? Going from not just research and scholarly work, but practical work and implementation to art and media, as we can see. And if we're going to change a system, it is said that if you want to change the world, you need a lawyer, you need an activist, and you need a storyteller. And I think within this network, we have demonstrated all 3. Whether it's how do we change policy, how do we do research, and how do we have a voice on the street, and then all the art exhibition, the movies that were made, the storytelling, the poetry, each an individual and each piece is a treasure. It's a treasure trove. And therefore, looking at all of that richness and all steeped in the concept of time that we are challenging and reimagining as we go. Where are we going to go after these wonderful 5 years? Well, first we have the website, and the website will remain alive one way or another. We will keep it alive. On the website is a rich resource by virtue of what projects were done and what you have heard, and all of the trying to capture all of this, whether it's the art, the culture, the research, and the practical information and resources. But and other things like our lexicon, our policy papers that will come out, and then it'll be forthcoming because the research that has been done is just now being published. You know, research always takes longer than just writing of a policy brief. So I imagine that as the years go by, we will have more and more research, all that we can attribute to the Rights for Time Network. So our imagination is that our impact will be that we shift the whole field in how people talk about trauma and time. I already see it, not just through our website, through the different conferences all over the world, how people are, through our influence and spreading the word and the reality on the ground, that trauma is a continuous thing, and how we deal with it biologically, psychologically, and socially, even politically, is changing and evolving. And which reminds us that we all have a responsibility on how to make our voices vocal and how we perceive the world. The world has been kind of a hegemony of a framework of Western viewpoint of the world. This network has shown that there are multiple perspectives around the world, and that each one of them is important and adds to the puzzle of making a new world for future generations that is more equitable and more equal. In a way, we are the world. If we look at the world abstractly, it seems we're in a very bad place all over the world. However, we are optimists, right? We see an ocean in a drop of water. And I want to say, no, what we have demonstrated through every member of this network and future members, that no, we have hope. We are the butterfly effect, which is the chaos theory in physics. When a butterfly flutters its wings, it moves the wind a centimeter. There's a hurricane beyond our imagination and beyond time and space of change that is good, that is useful. And we see it in the people's voices from all over the world. The call for justice. In the case of Gaza and Palestine, we see the South Africa stepping up, going to the International Criminal Court and for justice. We see it in the young people in the streets who are the voice of morality around the world. They are the pulse in every campus, everywhere. In the most remote places, you find students who do not relate by blood, by religion, by ethnicity, but relate by their humanity of standing up of what is right. That is our beacon of hope, that we can together build a new world with new governance and new systems that is better than the one we inherited, that we can give to our future children. So that's the hope. Now, what is it that we want from you? We want everybody to continue holding the torch going forward, sharing not the research, the practice, the art, the culture. The website is our rock that we will use to keep adding to it and spreading it. You all now have a responsibility that you know about this to keep sharing and referencing Rights for Time as a logo, as a website, so that if somebody comes in the future and studies the impact of the network, they can trace it through finding the Rights for Time. And it's a very catchy slogan, logo that's easy. And I also, and we hope that through that, we will influence the research and the data. And then that will lead to influencing governance and policy. And then it's the practitioners on the ground through the art and the culture that will influence the broader society. We may not see it now, but we have to believe that we will see it in the future. And maybe I want to end by thanking every member, first of all, Heather, for being the rock that inherited this project and then really took it above and beyond any one of our expectations. Despite all the bumps on the way, I don't call them challenges, I call them learning opportunities to bond and learn from each other and support each other. But the whole team, you have them all here, from Ben and Nora and Zoe and Tammy, and then the second tier of team, Kristen, Abdullah, and then most importantly, and Rasha, of course, but most importantly, and Maria and Stella and all the rest. But I want to talk about Anela, who has been our backbone, catching us every time and doing everything that we need. And so she has been phenomenal, and I'm sure she will go forward and do wonderful and amazing things, and hopefully consider that this time that she spent with us was part of together changing the world. And of course, the names of every person who participated, I can't name them all. And if I've forgotten anybody, forgive me. But I think I will end here, and that to be continued. So we're not going to call this the ending, the legacy that will survive beyond this team, beyond this project. And there are opportunities for funding that's already going on by Nora and Ben and others. But I'm sure the Rights for Time will live through the partners and members as they go forward. But we will always be here, so reach out, connect, email us. We will email you and keep on continuing the conversation. I don't know if Heather, you want to add anything? If Heather, yes. But thank you very much.
I think we, in deference to the wonderful interpreters that have been doing a phenomenal job, we must let them go at this point. So thank you very much to our interpreters, and thank you very much to Jenny Leonard as well, who's been furiously scribbling and drawing the whole time as well. But we must let everyone go on and rest their hands and their voices. So thank you very much again to absolutely everyone who's been included and presented so beautifully. And do take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.